weekly Wednesday live with yours truly is back. 1 month break and a comeback on the first Wednesday of April 2021. Here we are as promised. And this is indeed a live recording, and my name is Juha Ruokangas, on a mission from the gods and goddesses of fretted instruments. Continues. Nice to see you guys. Greg, Victor, Mibu. It's been a while. Look, I'm already losing my voice after 3 sentences. Okay. Remember when I took this break, the reason for it was our apartment renovation. Well, the topic for today's broadcast, quality, is very much inspired by the past 4 weeks. Past 4 weeks construction work I've been doing all evenings, all weekends, some weekdays as well. Well, as many of you know, our shop building is a 120 years old brick house here in Harviala, Finland. And let me see, 14 months ago, we moved also our home into the same building. And since then, we have lived in the middle of a renovation site. And no, we didn't get the job done during these past 4 weeks, but as my dear friend Lassi Ukkonen, our Valbacher engineer and co-designer of the circuit, always says, you know, that the project has never before progressed as far as where we are now with it. So we are as far as we've ever gotten with it, a renovation. That's comforting, I guess. So, a little renovation story. Not exactly from the past 4 weeks, but something that happened to me a long time ago in a similar situation. So we had an old house, not quite as old as the current place, but from the late 1940s, a little wooden house built after the Second World War. Well, I was renovating. Now, why do I get this weird deja vu feeling here? Well, you'd be surprised. I've been doing a lot of that stuff, renovating, building new, learning about different building and renovating methods. I guess at some point it could have been a second career, maybe. I don't know. No, one career is enough. Anyways, back to the story. So I was doing some modifications in that house, not this one, that other house. And these modifications, they required a few changes to the roofing that had stood up there since the 1940s. It was an all original tin roof. At that time, it means it was about 60 years old. So one day I was discussing with my neighbor, an elderly gentleman living next door, about the tin roof modification, and he said he knows a great roofsmith. And so eventually I called the number I got from my neighbor. I introduced myself and I explained briefly my business, and a little bit shaken, uncertain old man voice answered that, yes, I am a roofsmith, or I used to be, but I retired already 20 years ago. And that instant I realized, same generation as my neighbor who recommended the guy. So, you know, probably around 80 years old. And as I was about to apologize for disturbing him, the retired roofsmith asked, where did you say the house was? And I told him the address, and he went on, it must be the old Berggren's house. He built it right after the war, and I have made that roof. So I had called the guy who had made that roof all those years ago. You know, I sense he got a little bit emotional at this point. So he continued asking that, is there a problem with the roof? It's not that old yet. He felt it's not that old yet. So he felt he could come there and try to climb up to have a look. And at that point, I interrupted the old man. And I politely explained that there's absolutely no problem. The roof was in fine condition. It didn't leak, nothing. It just needed these modifications to be done. And I urged him to please not climb up to the roof to have a look. And of this development, he seemed to be quite relieved, but kept insisting that I keep him up to date in case there's any problems with the roof. And he even continued to give advice how such a roof should be fine for another 60 years if well maintained and painted every 20 years or so. And if there would be a leak, it could certainly be repaired, right? Let me see, there's comments pouring in. Let me see. Okay, something I don't understand, but what about before? Okay, Hyphonics, I think you can stop now. We've had your comment here like 12 times. That's enough, we understand. Thank you very much. Mibu says, what does people say? I'm with you, man. I renovated my old house since last summer and still not finished. The house was built in 1907. Yeah, I can relate to that. We're in the same boat, man. So, think about it. A retired roofsmith, so dedicated to the result of his handmade tin roof that he considered it under warranty all those years after it was built. And he was so upset about the potential problem that he would have been ready to climb up with his walking stick or rollator or whatever to have a look. Now, that is quality. That is quality, big time. And this story also reveals the huge fundamental shift that has happened in the world, in our cultures. A shift that is very obvious when observing the world of building construction, but equally valid in the world of guitars or guitar gear as well. So when I go to the hardware store today and I ask about roof materials, I have an endless choice of tins, tiles, and whatnot, surfaces to put up there. But reading the small print reveals to me that the best of them has maybe 30-year warranty, and an expected life cycle is somewhere between 30 to 40 years. Reading further reveals also that these materials are typically so-called repair-free materials. In other words, they cannot be repaired. So when the life cycle ends, you just replace it with new. Now, I don't know. For me, there's just something fishy about it. And this isn't just the roofing. I mean, basically all the modern build materials are the same. When making a new house, it has already then a calculated lifespan, life cycle by design. That one day this house comes to an end, the technical end of life. All the plastics to make the structures airtight and so on. It all corrodes, expires, and then the house is done for. Repair-free house. Okay, it's not absolutely black and white here. No, not everything about old house making was better. Not everything about new house building sucks. But the attitude, the culture has fundamentally changed. It is different. When that old little house of ours was built back in the 1940s after the Second World War, it was made to last for good. And anything that was put into it was repairable. It was thought that way, that it could be repairable one day. So in essence, if maintained with love and care, the house would continue to thrive. The house would continue to live until unforeseeable future. Well, the same goes obviously for this one, the 120 years old brick house that we live in now and we work in now. It does not have a predictable life cycle that one day it will come to an end. That would be a ridiculous thought even. Okay, the house does corrode and decay pretty fast if not taken care for, if not kept warm, and the roofing kept fine and all that. But when these maintenance tasks are done, there's not going to be a problem. Okay, so let's look at the big picture. Big picture. What has changed? Well, it's quite obvious. Today we live at the height of what is commonly known as throwaway culture. Or maybe we are actually already maybe a little bit past the height of it. I mean, we have started to understand and realize that this is not all good. We've taken the first, even though tiny, but first steps kind of away from it. But we're still there. The reality is that we are there. Throwaway culture, hands down, throwaway culture. From disposable diapers to consumer electronics to clothing, whatnot. So we buy cheap stuff, we use it until the life cycle is over, and then we throw it away. A typical life cycle for a dishwasher, 10 to 15 years. You can repair it up to a point, but beyond that point, it's better, more economical, cheaper to buy new. Clothing, shoes, the same thing. A lot of stuff is available to us so affordably that when that stuff breaks, it doesn't make sense to even consider having it repaired, because repairing would be more expensive than buying new. Goes to shoes, goes to clothing, goes to a lot of consumer electronics, so on. We have, of course, started to wake up to the fact that a culture where everything gets thrown away has its consequences. What we still don't often realize, though, is that this throwaway world has been largely made by design. It's designed that way. The manufacturers call it, planned, how do you say that word even? Planned obsolescence. Planned obsolescence. In other words, the stuff we buy ages, it decays, and it expires by design. It is also partly a consequence, a result of what free market capitalism has come to after its reigning power over the past 50 plus years. And of course, when phrased out like I've now done, it's a very disturbing thought. And, that makes many of us anxious, even depressed, because there's no escape. There's no way out of it, because we're within that sphere. Often there's no options. Feels so often we have no other choice than to go with that flow, that consuming frenzy. Well, before we sink too deep, let's change perspectives, okay? Let me pop up a quote. Where do I have it? If I go this way and put the quote there, I shouldn't. There it is. Okay, it's a little bit kind of cropped too tight, but maybe you can read it. I will read it to you anyways. This is a quote by Robert M. Pirsig from his book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I have it here, the book. This is the Finnish edition of it, Finnish translation. I've read it in Finnish and I've read it in English. And here comes the quote by Robert M. Pirsig. Quality isn't something you lay on top of subjects and objects like tinsel on a Christmas tree. Real quality must be the source of the subjects and objects, the cone from which the tree must start. Well, by the way, this book, where is it? There. This book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. In addition to having one of the coolest book titles ever, in my opinion, it is a masterpiece, hands down. A book that totally opens your eyes to what quality means on a philosophical level, as well as on the very concrete nuts and bolts kind of level. And in addition to that, it is also a book about sanity versus insanity, which is very fitting when talking about what quality means. Why so? Because chasing quality can drive a person insane. It can do that. Let me elaborate on this a little bit. What does Robert M. Pirsig mean when he says real quality must be the source of the subjects and objects, the cone from which the tree must start? Well, the way I understand it, quality is not a result. Quality is not a result. It's not a tinsel on a Christmas tree. It is the means. Quality is the means. I'll repeat that. Quality is not a result. Quality is the means. Quality is the means and it is the process. That retired roofsmith I told you about, he had figured it out. You know, the material he had used, I happen to know, 0.6 millimeter gauge galvanized steel. Nowadays they use 0.4 because it's easier to bend. But back in the day, 0.6, because it was stronger, it wouldn't corrode through if galvanized right and if painted on regular intervals. Well, yeah, the material the roofsmith had used, the way he had learned to fold and press the steel to make the seams, you know, the order of laying down the roof in order for the seams to fall the right way so that water would flow over the seams instead of hitting them against the grain. How to prepare the layer under the tin so there wouldn't be problems in the long run. Or if known problems would arise, how to make roofs so that it can be always repaired. When the roofsmith has mastered his craft, he takes all these scenarios and 5,000 other little whispers that tell him how to do things. He takes them into consideration, and that process is quality. And the result is a roof that will not only do its job now, but continues doing the job for the next generations, provided that it is cared for in a similar way. This is important now. That roof will continue doing the job for the next generations, provided that it is cared for in a similar way as the roofsmith cared for the work, you know, while making it, while making that roof. That process of caring for is the essence. That's how I say it, not essence. The essence of what quality means. That process of caring for is that essence. You know. need to bring up some comments here. Excuse me for a second, I'm reading. Victor says, if you own an apartment in Finland, you have to pay for repairments that are not essential. I guess it's just to accept part of the new paradigm. Yeah, we live in a different kind of a world of regulations and every facet of owning an apartment in our country is commercialized. So it has become in some ways a nightmare. Very true. Greg says, this is a comment to Mibu's earlier comment. Let's bring that first. Mibu says, yeah, the old times are gone, man, when things were durable and of great quality. Well, not completely gone, guys. Come on. Some things are done well. And I'm not referring necessarily to certain guitar brands that I'm not going to advertise on this broadcast. But okay, so Greg commented to Mibu, yeah, the same goes with cars. I can relate to that. Even though, again, it's not black and white. New cars are, for example, safer than any cars ever in the history. So, there are different ways to look at things. This is great. Mibu says, I would also say quality is the original thought at the beginning of every process. Exactly. The cone from which the tree will grow. Like, great comments. Keep them coming. And we're going to move on in the meanwhile. We were talking about caring for. That's the essence of what quality means. And, well, guitars then. Guitars. Well, many of you have maybe watched a video I did years ago about guitar prices. Why guitars cost what they cost. And in that video, I discussed the topic widely from many perspectives. And at the time, I received some quite spiky critic about that video, and stuff like how I judge people's consuming habits, and that most people don't have the luxury to choose a high-end guitar like ours. And so I was seen by some as an elitist defending my overpriced guitars while condemning others. Well, I understand. I totally understand this critic, and there is indeed a dilemma there that needs to be addressed. And it ties into that shift of consuming habits that we discussed earlier, the throwaway culture. On one hand, it all boils down to making music. That's essentially why, love for music, love for making music. That's essentially why we buy guitars, why we buy guitar gear. And today, in the modern age, the means to making music have been made easier than ever for us all. And I think that's a really great thing, no doubt. And then there's the other side. On the other hand, and this is the uneasy part where I very easily start sounding like a preacher man. even though my intent is not to point fingers, but rather talk about the process of quality. So, bear with me. On the other hand, when any object, not talking about guitars necessarily, any object is manufactured and catered in front of us with such a set of values in mind, and in such a low price that when that object inevitably breaks or malfunctions one day, it doesn't make sense to repair it because it's cheaper to buy a new object. That's where the actual source, the root of the problem reveals itself. Because if a product, any product, is manufactured by design to be thrown away in order to keep the spending money going, then that process can be seen as anti-quality, non-quality, the opposite of quality. You follow me? Well, the world is not black and white. What high-end guitars represent, what I or my kind, what we do, it's not perfect. What a cheap factory in China does is not all bad. And then there's this whole, these are the ends of the spectrum. Maybe these could be seen as the ends of the spectrum when looked at from monetary value or things like that. But then there's that whole, all the shades of all the colors in between. And guitars have never been the worst manifestation of the throwaway culture anyways. People do often care for, even the cheapest guitars and have them repaired in order to bring the most out of them. Which is great. I totally support that. I think that's a great thing to do. And high price tag is not a guarantee of a superior quality, just like low price tag doesn't necessarily mean crap. I've said it before, I say it again. It is much easier to build a crappy guitar by hand than a great guitar. And there's all varieties, and yeah, there are different videos about that stuff. So scan through my podcasts and videos, and you'll find. So, dear friends, I'm not here to judge anyone. My point is to discuss quality, and especially where does quality grow from. And so, saying personally, for me, at our workshop here, the decisions we make, the designs, the materials, the work methods, the work order of why we do this now and why we don't do that before, we do it after. We have very particular ways of doing things, choosing our hardware, everything from macro level to the big picture. It all flows from that same place that retired roofsmith was talking about during that phone call. Because loving what I do will naturally lead me into wanting to understand better what I'm doing. You can call it studying, you can call it practicing, you can call it even meditating or whatever, but it is essentially the same thing. The unyielding urge to understand better until at some point I realize that I have broken the barrier into a space or a state where others around me see me as someone who has mastered his craft. And with that experience, I've come to another realization that, in fact, this craft, it can be for me guitars, it can be anything. It can be playing guitar, it can be repairing those motorcycles. This craft, it cannot ever be mastered completely. There's always something new to learn. There's always an unexpected turn of events. A customer who points out a flaw in the design or in the workmanship. And this will teach me humility. And and hopefully it will wash away most, if not all, most arrogance that might still be lurking inside me. Pride. You know. Vanity. Pointing out that, hey, mister, we're all mortals. We all stumble. And sometimes it's like a smack in the face. And you know, these last sentences that I just uttered and walked you through, these are at the very, very essence of quality. These are part of what quality means. Let me read these couple of comments here. Getting here questions. Michael is asking my thoughts on necks made from heavy dense woods like cocobolo and rosewood. Blah, 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 blah. Any thoughts on Ken Lawrence? I work with Ken and love your work. Thank you, Peter. These questions from Michael and Peter have been recorded. We might come to them in later episodes. Right now, we're sticking to the quality talk. My apologies. Greg says, quality has a price. Yesterday I bought my 10 years old daughter her first skateboard. Did I go for the cheapest price? No, because I thought that this kind of quality would likely hinder her. Okay, it continues here. Hinder her motivation and likely technique. There you go. Of course, there is that thing with starting any new hobby. Like in this case, Greg's daughter's who wants to learn to skateboard, or someone who wants to learn guitar. The worst thing that we can do to our child is to buy the cheapest and and I don't mean you need to spend like fortunes to these things for beginners, but always aim for the best that you can, because that might have an effect on that, how that hobby will turn out. Like Greg pointed out, I mean, if you have a guitar, your first guitar is something that is just impossible, that doesn't inspire you at all. Well, sometimes when playing guitar or other passions, when they're strong enough in your soul, heart and soul, the passion overcomes any obstacle, and you can learn guitar with an impossible instrument that is unplayable. It is possible. I know of such cases, such stories, but it isn't the optimal situation. It's common sense, right? So yeah. George says, I do find sometimes the most expensive is not necessarily the best quality. This is where it is gold to find a good guide for help. This is very, very, very true. This is very, very true. Another little renovation story. To wrap this up. This is a more recent one. We're currently having at our this building, in our apartment, in that end of the building. That's the east end of our old Harviala stable building. We're currently having the plumbing done to our new bathroom and the utility room. And now, I don't know about you guys, but I have very mixed experiences of hiring a plumber. Because it seems really hard, difficult job to find a really good one that you feel that you can rely on. Schedules and the workmanship and all that. And they're very busy guys also. They have very much work. So finding someone whose behavior gives you that sense of quality. Well, I have found one. I found a plumber who has done all the plumbing stuff for us for over 10 years. He's a seasoned professional, kind of retired by now, but still goes on little projects here and there. And he has agreed to do these things for us as long as either I or my dad assists him whenever he's here working. And I really like working with the guy because every time I learned so much from him. And not only about plumbing, mind you, not only about plumbing. This guy, he plans his work very well. He's very knowledgeable. Like he always tells why he chooses to use this or that part, why we do this particular thing first and only then proceed to that part of the work. He walks me through the process, that if we would do it otherwise, the quality would suffer. But you know what feature in this character awakens the most trust in me, both as his assistant and his client? Well, he never hides the uncertainties. He always takes the time to explain what we do. He always points out the potential risks, like, for example, this part might start leaking one day, and that's why we're leaving it here in sight, so it won't leak for too long and cause damage to the flooring, because it's in sight instead of hidden somewhere, or whatever. Things like that. And he is the first person in the room to admit that he may have made a mistake. And when he behaves like that, it gives the sense of honesty and caring and safety. As his assistant, I am his assistant here. It gives me the permission to have a voice as well, because he gets it that I want to understand. He helps me to get there. And I can ask, I can criticize even, and he can shoot my critic down, or sometimes I've made a point and he has learned, which is, come on, the guy has made it forever and this work and so. And as his client, you can imagine, I know with 100% certainty that he does his best. He gives his best effort. And yet I also know that it still isn't going to be perfect because we're human beings. So I don't have false expectations. And if a problem would ever arise, it doesn't feel like a negative effort for me to contact him about it. It's more like we're exploring it together because He cares about it. I care about it. We both care about the work that's been done. You know. And so these next phrases, they kind of connect to what who was it again? George said, the most expensive is not necessarily the best quality. Well, because, yeah, there are these terms: high quality, premium quality, high end, superior quality. You know, this is all marketing terminology. It's loaded with promises, loaded with expectations, subjective expectations from every one of our own perspectives. But these sentences have very little to do with the reality, you know. You know what I mean? Because they're just sentences. They're not the means. They're not the process. They don't tell anything else than something that sounds fancy, and you can sell things with fancy titles. And the reality sometimes isn't obvious until maybe years ahead down the road. Yeah. Victor is saying here, buying secondhand is great. I applaud to that and agree to that. Secondhand is great for many reasons. It's great for the fact that it doesn't it's sort of recycling. It's not repurposing way kind of recycling, but it is giving a purpose to something that doesn't have a purpose to someone else anymore. So it's great. On the other hand, a lot of times, if there are problems in guitars, those problems would show themselves typically within the first year or years of the guitar being used. And so when you're buying a used guitar, you would already, these problems would have come out. So you could see if the neck is twisted, if it's not playable, if there's dead notes, there's fret problems, whatever, electronics problems. So secondhand is good. There's risks also. So there's no single recipe that goes. But I'm gonna bring out a couple of comments. Michael says, when I started playing, my older brother told my dad that I should get a cheap acoustic. If I really wanted to play, I wouldn't learn and earn a better guitar. And he continues, he was correct in that I learned and did get a better quality guitar, but I would never put that idea on a young player now. Yeah, this is, I think, attitudes and parenting has a lot of the times it has changed in this regard, and it's, I feel it's good. But I also get it that it's good to have challenges, it's good to have goals, it's good to have, like, you know, you don't just get everything just like that. It makes sense. But we are living a good time for guitarists, because there is there's a large amount of reasonably priced instruments to begin your hobby with that are actually pretty good guitars. They play well, they sound decent, so it's a different world that it was, like, I don't know, 40-50 years ago. Even, well, when I started playing, this is not 40 years, I'm not that old. 49 years old, so, well, 35 years old. 35 years ago, yeah, my first guitar was hardly playable, but the very first one. But soon after, through lucky coincidences, I got my hands on a better guitar that still wasn't like out of my reach, so got me going. So Mibu says here, caring is essential to get quality. That is right. And people, if you have someone in mind that should see this video, please do share it to that person with my warmest regards. If you disagree with what you've just heard, or you feel I've forgotten something important, I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. Why? Well, because I want to understand better. That's the truth. And this was the comeback episode from my 1 month break. And dudes, the Deads next week we'll talk about something related to the concept of quality, but that has a more, how would I say, a more magical aura to it. It is something that seems to be ever eluding us, mere mortals, just out of reach. Yes, we'll talk about virtuosity. If I want to become a virtuoso guitarist, is it even possible? Or is it just a fool's hope? Let's find out next week. And take care now. Look after your loved ones. Thank you, everyone, for your support. I'm glad to have your back as I'm back. It would be horrible to do this alone. So thank you for your support, continuous support. I wish you all a great evening and a great week ahead. We'll see you next Wednesday. Peace, love, and good music. Until next time.